Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real tonight. When a man loves you, he gets comfortable. Not careless, not evil, just comfortable. See, comfort makes a man think tomorrow is guaranteed. Comfort makes him think you'll always be right there, answering the phone, fixing the vibe, holding the relationship together. And when that comfort sits too long, effort starts to relax. Not because he stopped loving you, but because he stopped feeling the urgency of losing you. Distance changes a man's behavior faster than words ever will, because men don't respond to explanations the way they respond to experience. You can talk until your throat hurts. You can explain your feelings 100 different ways. You can cry, complain, negotiate, and try to reason with him, but none of that hits a man the way a shift in energy does. Words are easy for a man to hear and ignore at the same time. He can nod, agree, even apologize, and still go right back to doing what he was doing before. But when your behavior changes, when your availability changes, when your presence is no longer guaranteed, his system starts reacting immediately. A man is wired to notice patterns. When you've been consistent, nurturing, responsive, and emotionally available, he unconsciously builds his life around that reliability. He expects the text. He expects the call. He expects you to smooth things over. And the moment that pattern breaks, it doesn't feel small to him. It feels alarming. He might not say it out loud, but internally he starts feeling unsettled. Something feels off. Something doesn't feel safe anymore, and that discomfort forces attention. Distance works because it removes the emotional cushion. When you stop chasing clarity, stop over-giving, stop filling every silence, he suddenly has to sit with the space you left behind. That space makes him think, and most men don't start thinking deeply about the relationship until something disrupts their comfort. Distance disrupts comfort instantly. It makes him replay conversations. It makes him notice how quiet his phone feels. It makes him realize how much of the emotional weight you were carrying. What's powerful about distance is that it doesn't argue. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't beg. It simply shows, and showing is far more effective than telling. When you pull back, you're not saying, "I'm hurt." You're letting him feel the absence of what he used to receive effortlessly, and that feeling creates a reaction. He may become confused. He may become anxious. He may suddenly increase effort, or he may go quiet trying to process what's happening. All of those are responses. All of those mean it's working. Men often don't realize the value of something while it's consistently available. They realize it when access changes. Distance changes the dynamic because it shifts control from words to reality. Now, he has to respond to what's happening, not what you're saying. And reality doesn't allow excuses. Reality makes him confront whether he's been showing up or just coasting. This is why distance changes behavior faster than conversations ever could, because it bypasses ego and goes straight to emotion. It forces awareness without confrontation, and awareness is the first step to change. Silence forces emotional truth to surface, because when the noise stops, a man is left alone with his thoughts, and that's where the truth lies. As long as you're talking, explaining, reminding, or reacting. His attention stays on managing the moment instead of understanding the meaning behind it. Silence removes that escape. When you stop filling the space with words, emotions rise to the surface without interference. He can't hide behind distraction or familiarity anymore. The quiet becomes a mirror, and what he sees in it is how much you truly matter to him. When silence enters a relationship, it creates a pause that interrupts emotional autopilot. A man who loves you may not always be expressive, but he feels deeply when something changes. Silence makes him feel the absence of emotional access. He notices that he no longer knows what you're thinking, how you're feeling, or where he stands. That uncertainty is uncomfortable, and discomfort forces reflection. He starts replaying interactions, searching for clues, trying to understand what shifted. In that process, his real emotions begin to show themselves. Silence also removes the safety net of reassurance. When you're always available to clarify, soothe, or forgive, he never has to sit with the possibility of loss. But when you go quiet, that safety disappears. Now he has to confront the idea that you may be pulling away emotionally. Even if you're still physically present, that thought carries weight. It triggers fear, curiosity, and awareness all at once. And those emotions are far more honest than anything he might say in the middle of an argument. A man's emotional truth doesn't always show up in speeches or grand gestures. It shows up in restlessness, in overthinking, in sudden effort, or in unexpected vulnerability. Silence creates the conditions for those reactions. Without constant communication, his defenses lower. He can't argue with silence. He can't negotiate with quiet. All he can do is feel it, and feeling leads to clarity. Silence also shifts power. Not power in a controlling way, but in an energetic way. When you stop chasing responses, you stop feeding the dynamic that allowed him to stay emotionally passive. Now he has to decide whether to step forward or let the distance grow. That decision reveals his truth. If he reaches out, initiates, or shows concern, it's because the silence made him realize what he stands to lose. If he doesn't, the silence still did its job by exposing the reality of his emotional investment. This is why silence is so effective. It strips away performance and leaves only intention. It forces honesty without pressure. And in that quiet space, a man discovers whether love is strong enough to move him to action. A man reacts when he feels the risk of loss, because risk is what activates his emotions and his sense of responsibility at the same time. As long as he believes you will always be there, no matter what, his mind stays relaxed. He may care deeply, but without risk, there is no urgency. Love can exist in comfort, but effort is born in uncertainty. The moment he senses that your presence is no longer guaranteed, something shifts inside him. His attention sharpens, his emotions wake up, and he starts paying closer attention to everything he may have taken for granted. The idea of losing you forces him to evaluate the relationship from a different angle. Instead of thinking about how things feel right now, he starts imagining what life would look like without you. He notices the emotional support you provided, the stability you brought, and the ways you made his life easier and more meaningful. That reflection doesn't happen when he feels safe from consequences. It happens when he feels the possibility of absence. Loss makes value visible. When risk enters the picture, a man's behavior becomes more intentional. He may suddenly communicate more, check in more often, or show concern he didn't express before. This isn't confusion, it's awareness catching up. Fear of loss has a way of cutting through distractions. It brings buried emotions to the surface and forces him to confront what he truly feels. He may not articulate it perfectly, but his actions start speaking louder than his words. Risk also challenges his ego. Men often pride themselves on being in control emotionally and situationally. When he feels you pulling back, he realizes control isn't as solid as he thought. That realization can be unsettling, but it's also clarifying. It makes him reassess his role in the relationship. He begins to question whether he has been showing up enough, whether his actions align with his feelings, and whether he has been taking your love for granted. What makes the risk of loss so powerful is that it cannot be ignored. It's not a threat spoken out loud, it's a shift he feels. He senses that something important is changing, and that uncertainty forces him to respond. Some men respond by stepping up, others by pulling away, but either way, the truth reveals itself. Risk exposes intention. A man may not react immediately, but internally the process has started. He's thinking more than he admits. He's measuring his feelings against the possibility of losing you. And in that moment, love stops being passive. It becomes something he must protect, prove, or confront. Distance triggers reflection, fear, and clarity because it removes distraction and replaces it with awareness. When you are always present, always available, always responding, a man rarely has the space to examine his own behavior. He moves through the relationship on routine. Distance interrupts that routine. It slows everything down and creates a pause where thoughts get louder. In that pause, reflection begins. He starts thinking about what has changed, what he might have done differently, and why things no longer feel as secure as they once did. Fear enters quietly at first. It's not always dramatic or obvious, but it settles in the background of his mind. He wonders if you're pulling away emotionally, if your feelings are changing, or if he's losing his place in your life. That fear doesn't come from manipulation or games. It comes from uncertainty, and uncertainty forces honesty. When a man feels unsure, he stops assuming and starts questioning. He becomes more aware of what he has and what he could lose. As distance grows, clarity follows. The emotional noise clears, and what remains is the truth of how much you matter to him. He notices your absence in small moments, the lack of your messages, the quiet during times he expected your presence, the emotional gap where your support used to be. Those moments stack up and create understanding. He begins to realize the role you played, not just as a partner, but as a source of comfort, stability, and emotional grounding. Distance also gives him a chance to separate emotion from habit. When you're always there, he may confuse routine with connection. Distance forces him to ask himself, whether he misses you as a person or simply misses the convenience of your presence. That question brings clarity. If he truly loves you, the distance will pull him closer emotionally, even if he doesn't immediately know how to express it. If the connection was shallow, the distance will expose that as well. Reflection during distance often leads to accountability. Without constant interaction, he can't deflect or avoid self-examination. He starts recognizing patterns where he may have been inattentive, dismissive, or emotionally unavailable. This awareness can be uncomfortable, but it's necessary for growth. Distance doesn't accuse, it reveals. Clarity doesn't always arrive peacefully. Sometimes it comes with regret, anxiety, or a sudden urge to fix things. But it always brings truth. Distance strips away illusion and forces a man to see the relationship for what it truly is and what it could become if he chooses to step up. Love becomes visible when comfort is removed, because comfort allows feelings to stay hidden and untested. When everything feels secure, a man can love you quietly, passively, without ever having to prove it. He may feel deeply, but there is no pressure to express, protect, or prioritize that love. Comfort creates a false sense of permanence. It makes him believe the relationship will hold itself together without conscious effort. The moment comfort disappears, love is forced into the open. When you remove comfort, you remove predictability. He no longer knows when he'll hear from you, how you'll respond, or where he stands emotionally. That uncertainty shines a light on what he truly feels. If love is strong, it doesn't fade in discomfort, it reacts. It pushes him to reach out, to ask questions, to re-engage. Discomfort awakens instinct. A man may not always know how to articulate love, but he knows how to respond when something important feels at risk. Comfort often allows complacency to disguise itself as stability. A man can convince himself that everything is fine because nothing is demanding change. But when comfort is taken away, he can no longer rely on assumptions. He has to look at his actions instead of his intentions. He begins to notice whether he's been present or merely occupying space. That realization reveals love in its raw form, stripped of convenience. Removing comfort also changes the emotional balance. When you stop over-giving, stop filling emotional gaps, and stop being the constant source of reassurance, he feels the weight of that absence. He realizes how much emotional labor you were providing. Love becomes visible in how he responds to that loss. Does he step forward to share the load, or does he retreat because he depended on your comfort more than he invested in your connection? Discomfort tests priorities. When things are easy, priorities don't need to be chosen. When things shift, a man must decide what matters enough to fight for. Love shows itself in effort, consistency, and willingness to adapt. Comfort never demands those things. Discomfort does. And that demand forces honesty. Love revealed under discomfort is more reliable than love expressed during ease. Anyone can feel affection when everything is smooth, but when comfort is removed and love still moves a man to action, that's truth. That's when love stops being a feeling and becomes a choice made visible through behavior. A woman's absence can reset a man's priorities because absence creates contrast, and contrast sharpens awareness. When you are always present, your value blends into the background of his daily life. Not because it isn't important, but because it has become familiar. Familiarity dulls attention. Absence, however, brings everything back into focus. When you step back, he feels the difference immediately. The routines change. The emotional rhythm shifts, and in that disruption, he begins to recognize how much of his life revolved around your presence. Absence gives him time to notice what you actually contributed, not just emotionally, but mentally and energetically. He realizes how often you listened, supported, encouraged, and stabilized situations he didn't even notice were heavy. When you are no longer there to absorb stress or soften his edges, the weight of that responsibility falls back on him. That weight forces reflection. He starts seeing how much he relied on you, not as a crutch, but as a constant source of balance. When a woman pulls back, it challenges a man's assumptions about permanence. Many men operate under the belief that love, once established, will remain unchanged. Absence breaks that illusion. It introduces the idea that connection requires maintenance, not just existence. This realization can be unsettling, but it's necessary. It pushes him to reevaluate what he has been prioritizing: work, distractions, ego, comfort. Suddenly, none of it feels as satisfying when the emotional anchor is missing. Absence also removes emotional shortcuts. When you're present, a man may postpone effort because he assumes there will always be time. When you're absent, time feels limited. That urgency brings priorities into alignment. He starts asking himself what truly matters and what he's willing to lose. This internal questioning doesn't always show up immediately in words, but it reshapes how he thinks about the relationship. A woman's absence can also shift the power dynamic in a healthy way. It reminds him that your presence is a choice, not an obligation. That understanding changes how he values the connection. When something is freely given, it is cherished more deeply. Absence reinforces that your love is not guaranteed, and that realization can inspire respect